not even members of the NEC believed in this thing. No, this thing won't happen.
Wow.
We will not resolve this load shedding.
Do you have any views on, the wisdom of going down this government of national unity route?
So we characterize this as a moment of fundamental consequence. So these are not conditions of our own choosing.
You could be a potential ANC leader. Something that you're thinking about? Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today I am extremely honored to be joined by the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa. Minister, thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you very much, Sis, and thanks for the invite, and congratulations on this platform for shaping the narrative and just adding a diversity of views in the public narrative. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. That's very kind. Tell us a bit about how you got interested in politics. We know about your rise onto the scene in Tshwane, but can you give us some context about some of the things we might not know about you and your earlier life?
Well, it's more like politics found me. So I'm from a place called Oratile, about 15 kilometers west of Pretoria CBD. I'm born in a family of nine siblings.
Wow.
My brothers were activists, and in fact, one of them went into exile to join the armed wing of the ANC MK. But during my early years, my place was a meeting point of community or activists in the area. I'm from an area that was called Beirut because of its militancy, and also the fact that we produced, I think, per capita, if you had to look just in that geographic space, the most number of MK combatants. So it's people who were politically conscious, but people who were prepared to lay their lives in favor of the victory of the democratic project. So when I was growing up, late at night, activists will congregate in my house, and of course they'll be planning their next move. And of course then I became interested just knowing why are these people assembling here. Of course, to the great displeasure of my parents. They just didn't want us to be close to that because they knew the dangers that were inherent. And of course I became a student activist, and when I went to university, then I joined the ranks of SASCO, and in fact, in my first year of being at university, as those who were there before me say, it was an extraordinary feat. So I was part of the executive. The election of SASCO during those days, I don't know now, will happen towards at the end of the year. So in my first year, I was in the leadership of SASCO, and then I just continued that activism. I mean, I characterize myself, so I'm not a politician. I keep on insisting I'm an activist who's an engineer who just happened now to be deployed in public office. So my orientation has always been that I must first work in favor of improving the lives of the downtrodden, ensuring that the demographic, the dividends of the democratic project are equitably distributed. I'm a firm believer in science, and of course engineering lends itself to science because it relies, or if you like, on the accurate quantitative expressions. So I think we can use science and engineering to genuinely change the lives of people. So yes, I mean, those were the early stages, and when I graduated, I applied my trade, and of course led my branch in Atteridgeville, led the zone again in Atteridgeville. So how the ANC is organized, the most basic unit of the organization is a branch, and when you pull the branch together, you aggregate them, we call them a zone, and then it's a region that follows, if you like, municipal boundaries. It could either be a metro or a district municipality, so it just follows those boundaries for ease of management of your constituency. Yes, then I led a zone, and I graduated to be the chair of a region, and of course I got to be assigned responsibilities to be a ward councillor first, and then I deployed to be executive mayor, MEC, and now I have a responsibility of being a mayor, or minister rather, of energy and electricity. But the point I want to emphasize is about the service and contribution. So even if I were to be asked to go and lead a technical unit, I'll do so into the best of my ability, like I did when I was moved from being an MEC to head the investments and infrastructure office. I must say it was an assignment that I truly enjoyed, because we were able to show that you can use the foundational network industries, energy, water, and transportation, telecommunication, to really change the lives of people, and also to improve the performance of the South African economy. If you had to ask me, I think our major shortcomings are in those areas. You resolve those areas, the South African economy is likely going to grow at exceptional levels. Of course, we must build in instruments to ensure that that growth is employment creating, and it's also transformative. But the point is, I think there's great value in exerting your time and resources in getting the foundational network industries right. But yes, to your question, it's something that visited me at a very, very young age, and I've been in that space since then.
Were there any particular moments in South African history or stories or experiences that led you down the activist path that you can recall, or memories that strike or stand out in your mind as leading you down the activist path?
Well, first, I mean, it's just a deeply personal experience. I make the point that, I mean, we were driving with my father to our remote rural village in Botlokwa, about 60 kilometers north of Polokwane. And the taxi driver got to, if we were using public transport, he got to a filling station, and for one reason or the other, he wasn't aware that it's his turn now. There was a queue. I mean, it was during the what you call Good Friday. So you know that period of the year, there's a pilgrimage of people in Limpopo, and also going to Moria. So when you get to filling stations, I think you'll find that it's congested. So the chap did not move the car. It was his turn now to move in and fill the car petrol. And then someone cut him, justifiably so. I would have done the same. And this person happened to be white, a white driver. And then the taxi driver just stood his ground. No, it's my turn. And the chap says, no, but you waited. So I couldn't have known that maybe you have a mechanical problem. That's why I cut you. And it escalated. Luckily, it didn't become violent, and they were able to calm down. So as we're driving out of that, my father says, but I mean, this chap, where does he get the temerity to raise his voice? As I explained, no, but it was his turn. So my father says, no, but you don't do that to a white person. Just don't do that.
Sure.
Now, I know how deeply psychological apartheid is, the kind of damage that it has inflicted, at least on my father, and I can imagine that there's many people who can share the same stories about that experience. And I knew that something has to be done. And of course, being deeply conservative, I didn't take up the conversation further with my father, because he has made his point, and his point will prevail. Then I knew that I think we have a duty ourselves as a younger generation to ensure that we are able to change that situation. So that sits with me. I mean, even today, as I speak to you, I just have vivid memories, just a mental picture of what unfolded. And you could tell, I mean, my father was deeply concerned, and he makes the point, no, if he was a black person, then that's fine, but just don't do that to white people. So, and I mean, the fellow was much younger. I mean, so you could tell that this thing is deep. I mean, it's just beyond the material issues. It's just deep. And I think that those who orchestrated and those who formulated apartheid, I think they knew what they were doing. And if there's one thing that you could learn from them is their ability to plan and cause long-term damage in favor of their project. So those are some of the lessons you can draw from that, that you can design a program, of course, in this instance, that is progressive, inclusive, pursuant of an egalitarian society. So it must have long-lasting impact. Of course, apartheid was an opposite of that, but I'm just saying that if something is properly conceptualized, and then you have both the legal and material instruments to prosecute it, you can go very far. So yes, I mean, those are some of the memories, of course. And then it gets to manifest itself later. My own personal experiences when I went to varsity. The first time I was in a class where majority were white. So I've never been in a classroom where there's a white person. So that's the first part. The second part is my relationship with a PC was non-existent. So the first time I encountered a PC is when we were going to do what they call computer programming. So we had class lessons. So essentially they take you through programming, and then we go into a lab to do the actual programming. I could comprehend, I mean, the algorithms, and then you go into a lab. So I remember this, it was about 12 minutes into the first tutorial. So I raised my hand. The teacher came. So he thought maybe I had any issue with my programming. So my difficulty was knowing where to switch on the computer. I was too embarrassed to state that at the onset. But I knew, I mean, others were continue with their work. I had to do that. So I knew that, I mean, we have to do something to change the situation. And I'm in no way suggesting that we have changed the situation. I mean, this encounter that I experienced many years ago at the age of 16 when I went to university. There are kids who are writing exam now. They are going to experience it next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is 30 years into the victory of the democratic project. I think it's a major indictment. I think we must start from that premise. It's a major indictment. So we have a duty, I think, to ensure that we address this situation as quickly as possible.
How did you end up at university at the age of 16?
Oh, yes. So I started much younger, my schooling.
Yeah.
And then I jumped the grade 2. So I moved from what was standard 5. So I was at grade 7.
Yeah.
And then I went into Form 2.
Okay, so grade 9.
Yes. So so that's why those are I started early, and then I jumped the grade when I was much earlier.
So you matriculated at 15?
Yes, and then much earlier says, no, it's good enough to go to school. So I joined the rest, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Amazing. Tell us, as we move on to your political career in high office, what your time at as mayor of Tshwane was like. You were quite a young mayor, and it's a big city. It's an important place for the economy. What were some of the highs and lows of that experience?
Well, I think that journey starts earlier when I was a ward councillor in 2000. The community decided, look, you matured enough to go and represent us. I had been active. So when I come back from work, I would assist the youngsters there with their math and physics lessons. I like my math and physics. And during the weekends, I will also facilitate classes and also, as an avid football fan, support some of the teams there. I was working this time around, so I had something to spend, invest in these young people. And of course, I took great interest in community issues. And of course, like I said, I mean, I was in the leadership of the ANC, so we're at the forefront of some of the activism in the community. So people had an appreciation of the work that we were doing, and they thought, look, you think you're good enough to lead. And that has been very useful in situating me in understanding how municipal governance function, if you like, the complexities of local government. So if you like, it was preparing me for something much later. So this was in 2000. So I had one term, 2002, 2005. And then I left, went to, of course, it was part-time at the time. So I was still practicing engineer. And then we started our own engineering consulting firm, still continued, like I said earlier on, then graduated to be the chairperson of the zone, activism continued. And then party elections, our generation then prevailed, and I was the chair of the ANC. The then mayor, who also happens to be my aunt, Tshwane Ramokgopa, Dr. Tshwane Ramokgopa was the mayor.
I knew you had the same surname.
Oh no, she's like my aunt. Yes. And then there was a cabinet reshuffle, and then she was promoted to be the deputy minister of health. Right. And then the vacancy occurred, and the ANC ran its own internal process, and the collective of the membership in Tshwane felt that no, the chair of the region must be the mayor. So I completed the term. This is 2010. And then we went into the 2011 local government elections, and then we won. And I became a mayor for a full term. To your question, so first is I think being a mayor, it's a exceptionally remarkable and rewarding experience. Rewarding in that you are able to change the lives of people directly. I mean, if you make a determination that we're going to connect so many houses to the grid, we're going to connect so many houses to water infrastructure, we're going to build X kilometers of roads, we're going to designate an area as part of our land use management for human settlement. I mean, those are direct, if you like, impacts that you are making the lives of people. So we're able to formalize, I think, at the time, over 101 informal settlements. And by that, I mean, first they'll have an address, they'll have a title deed, they'll have utilities connected at the stand level, so water coming out of their tap in the yard, and also electricity. We ran the free Wi-Fi project, changing the lives of young people. I think we're ahead of our time. I think our view was that free internet access should be a basic municipal function. At the time, they thought we were crazy, and we found a private partner who was willing at least to connect their public facilities at their own cost, because they were generating money from the number of people who log into that. It shows the traffic. You'll know this much better than I do, and they make their money from advertisement. But that was life-changing. So it meant that young people in the far northern areas of Tshwane, in Hammanskraal, young person who wants to apply for employment, first they have access to the adverts. Second, they can send their CVs electronically, as opposed to taking a taxi, physically delivering it, or buying a newspaper at the time to check what the adverts are for employment opportunities. A youngster who's studying at a TVET or say UP, doesn't have a student accommodation, rest, stays at home, commutes, has got the same chance as the one who stays on rest. They've got access to internet, so they can research and do all sorts of things. So it's a great equalizer, and I'm not suggesting that the levels of penetration, because they were not at the household level, but essentially all public facilities. And of course the downside. So at the time we made the point that we could anticipate that we're going to run into a big problem. First, we could tell that the collection levels were beginning to reduce, but also people were finding it increasingly difficult to pay for their services. But we also knew that there were other competing demands now. So people will first pay their DSTV, airtime, and all of that, and relegate the payment of municipal services to one of the last obligations for them to meet. And then we initiated a project on smart meters. So the intention was that first it's not postpaid. So the current situation is you consume and then you pay later, you receive a bill. we also had issues with regards to the accuracy of that bill. So you go to many municipalities, there's estimations. And of course, you didn't have any instrument for credit control. Very difficult to effect credit control. And fourthly, very difficult in some instances to provide this free basic electricity. So if you have if you like, a technology platform, we can give you directly. So you can preload, if you like, your units, and then you are able to get that upfront. And then we also get our money upfront. So it's prepaid, like the name says. And then money in the bank, we are able to deploy that money. Of course, the process was found to be suspect, and the Constitutional Court says, look, you needed to run a transparent, competitive process. What we did at the time, we got an unsolicited bid. Of course, it's a blemish. We really wanted coming from a good place, and they said no, that the procurement process was irregular, and then you have to restart it. But what's the point I'm making? If you come to think of the situation that is confronting municipalities, if we had gone that route earlier, we had done it properly, and I admit that the court has found, and we accepted that, I think we could be talking something different. And then we also thought of ensuring that we broaden the revenue base of municipality. So instead of just relying on traditional revenue sources, so that's your rate and taxes and utilities, we needed to broaden the if you like, the economic potential of the municipalities, and have tourism and other form of non-conventional revenue sources to grow as a share of the revenue, so that you are de-risking, if you like, your income streams. So the concentration you go to metros and municipalities is on your rates and taxes and utilities. So if there's a failure of people to pay, then you are in big trouble. And then he said, oh, okay, there's a new area to the east of our country, our municipality called Bronkhorstspruit, that perhaps we could think of that. We thought of something more along there's a very popular music concert in the world called Glastonbury, where it happens over 3-4 days and all of that. So we conceptualized that, the team conceptualized, and of course it fell flat. So those are, the major blemishes, and I think that it just dent that track record. But the point I'm making is that it was a genuine effort by officials and the political leaders to see how best we can grow the economy of the space. So I will not sit here and suggest that is a blemish-free record. So I thought it is important that I emphasize on those. But yes, we're able to ensure that we have the biggest roads construction program of any municipality at the time. We targeted Soshanguve, and then the next phase was going to be Amanskrale and those areas. So on that score, we succeeded. The last one that I think is a major victory was our ability to democratize decision making. So we introduced something called Kukamautu. Every week, what you will traditionally refer to as an imbizo, but this one before we go into an area, would have done an analysis. What are the infrastructure requirements, any other social requirements, make a big intervention there, followed by a mayor's engagement with communities. To the extent that there are still gaps, then we found a way of closing those gaps and an accountability mechanism. And then we're also able to bring communities, even before the advent of ward committees, that we're able to set up communities to work with ward councillors, especially in the ANC control wards, so that it's from the bottom up, these conversations around how we perceive and understand development. And then we standardize our caucus. Every month there has to be a public meeting, and there has to be a record of that public meeting, what the demands are, what the suggestions are, what the grievances are, and you are able to show the next round when you go back that you are responding to those challenges. So I think the democratization of subnational space is important. You are drawing on the agency of communities, just an appreciation that they do possess agency. So it's not true that the people in informal areas are unthinking. that people in informal areas don't have aspirations, that people in informal areas are blind to what is happening. So we're able to open up that space. And I think for me, that's a big positive, just a democratization of that space. Very, very important. People were able to exercise their agency in favor of their own demands and aspirations.
Let's come to your current post. I would go so far as to say you may be one of the most consequential ministers in South African history, actually.
Yes.
How did you learn that you were going to be invited to become the Minister of Electricity? Did the president call you? Did he invite you to his office? And tell us that story and what you thought, because, I mean, the country was in the grip of a serious, serious crisis. Why did you decide to take it on?
First is when I left as the MEC of Economic Development and Environment, the president invited me, in fact, on my way back home to say, through the then Premier, Makura, to say, just ask Comrade Butler to come pass by me. I want to have a conversation. So we got there and he told me, look, given your knowledge, first your professional expertise as an engineer and your knowledge of the public sector, I really wanted to come and drive infrastructure. I mean, if you come to think of it, I mean, infrastructure is a catalyst for economic development. So if you read the NDP, it says that we have aspirations of achieving gross fixed capital formation, which is a proxy for investment of 30% of GDP. Even at the time, we're sitting at about 17% of GDP. Now, as I speak to you, it has deteriorated. Of course, a large part of it has to do with COVID. We're sitting at 12.9% of GDP. And then it goes further to break it down to say a third of that must come from public sector, 2/3 from private sector. Already an admission that the private sector, the liquidity, the expertise is the one that is going to drive growth. The state must enable that to happen.
Sure.
Of course, the state is responsible for foundational network in industry sectors, because by definition, that's a public good. Public road, water, you mentioned, it's a public good, and then it enables development. So I was in that space, we were able to put together the infrastructure development plan 2050
from within the presidency.
Yeah, in the presidency, we drove catalytic projects to the tune of 270 billion rand, and we could see the pipeline over a period of 5 years, 1.8 trillion. We introduced a dispensation to invest our energies on project preparation so that the projects are, if you like, shovel ready. They're able to attract the kind of fiscal support. And when they get that fiscal support, they are ready, then you can roll them out. So so that's the work I'd been doing. And then the president calls me. Okay, then the president makes the announcement. During the delivery of the sauna, and then he calls me. So I thought I was meant to give him an update on some of the work we're doing.
Right.
And then the conversation started. Look, I mean, we're sitting with this problem, and I think that you best positioned to help us to resolve this problem. Of course, first I was taken aback that, I mean, we are doing tremendous work, and I really could see that our work is finding traction. But I respected the view of the president. First, just for him to, amongst the many competent people, to say, I think you should be the one. And the enormity of the work, so it's a level of confidence he was placing on me. Because my failure really is going to be a reflection on the president and his legacy. And you remember at the time, very few people thought it was a bad idea. Why do you have to have just a minister responsible for electricity? And then I said, look, I first appreciate if I'll apply my mind. I knew what it's going to take. First is that you are going to be cast into the public light. At the time, I told my wife that I'll invest a lot of time being with family, but I knew what was going to confront me. And of course, my sisters, I'm very, 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 very close to them. So I called them, look, this is the request from the president. So all they said, no, follow your heart if you think. And that mattered a lot coming from my wife. I understand country duty. So I was able to go back and say, I'm ready. And I knew what to expect. I mean, load shedding is an albatross. I mean, just undermining the ability of the economy to grow, deteriorating the lived experiences of people. I mean, imagine 5 hours to 10 hours in a day without electricity, something you have come to, you are accustomed to, you took for granted. So a major disruption. So if there's load shedding, what comes to your mind is that incompetent fellow. Even 3 weeks into my office, I mean, I could tell there was a barrage of criticism on social media, but that was not to be expected, I must say. So that's the only consolation. And I knew that once we resolve this, victory will be sweeter in the face of adversity. And I knew after I did what I call a tour to diagnose the nature of the problem as a civil engineer, engaging with the colleagues there, I knew this thing can be resolved. Genuinely. It was just a matter of time. And it helped that you had a board, competent people, technically sound. I mean, just go and look at the board of Eskom. A lot of people don't give themselves time to look at them. Exceptional credentials. So I knew the base is covered there. And then the men and women, the people who are at the coalface of this delivery, all of them, the station one, exceptional wealth of experience. All they needed is just the kind of support necessary for us to coordinate our efforts. I knew we'll do this, and of course, put together a plan as engineers, very meticulous, thorough, deliberate timelines, budget, and all of that. We kept to that discipline. Of course, the kind of performance we are seeing now is not accident. It's something that is designed and orchestrated. But yes, I mean, to your point, I was surprised that the president had that amount of confidence. I really didn't want to fail him first, but most importantly, the South African people. And we did our best, and we're here. So now we've built enough runway. We're now looking at focusing on additional generation capacity outside Eskom, because we've got the luxury of the lights being on. You can think long term, because the most immediate pressure close to being resolved. So I'm not suggesting to you that it's resolved. We'll tell you when it's being resolved, but we are very, very close to that point, Caesar.
Sam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. What was the moment of the most pressure you felt? Because now I think things are dramatically different, and maybe you don't get enough credit for just how different things are, because I remember a time when South Africans were beginning to worry that there was going to be a complete blackout, that communications infrastructure was going to fail. And those days seem quite far behind us. Of course, we may go back. Who knows what could happen? But the constant stage 6 and stage 4 seems to be an increasingly distant memory. Yes. But you were right there at a moment when it could have gone either way. Just talk us through what it was like to be there in that moment, and what was the most difficult moment that you can remember?
So I think 3 weeks into my appointment, and there was an intensification of the intensity of load shedding and escalation. So got to stage 6 almost consistently for over a period of a month. And of course, at that time, I'm still diagnosing the reports, the nature of the problem, going from one station to the other. And of course, I mean, when you give update, people are expecting you to say, this is the intervention we'll make. Yeah. Unfortunately, I was not in a position to suggest what those interventions are, because we needed to coordinate that response with the board and also the new leadership. And of course, Mr. Mbalula, the head of generation, was appointed, I think, a month after I was appointed as a minister. So also needed to give him time so that we are able to exchange notes and see how best to do it. And then there's the intensification of load shedding.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, we didn't want it to go beyond stage 6. And of course, at the time, because I mean, it was almost, it was stubborn stage 6 load shedding. The best we were getting to was stage 4. And then there was talk of a grid collapse. I knew that one happened. I'm saying that genuinely. So we knew that the system operator, the fact that we are intensifying load shedding, it's with the sole purpose of protecting the grid. So I knew that that was in place. I must say that the most, if you like, painful, there's no other way of describing it. I was a standard item for obvious reasons in the National Executive Committee. So the National Executive Committee of the ANC concerned about the situation and wanting to understand what is it that you are doing to solve this now that you have been given this responsibility. So painfully in that, there was a period where I could tell that not even members of the NEC believed in this thing. No, this thing won't happen.
Wow.
We will not resolve this load shedding. I must say that I received the most support from the SG. Almost every other day calls me in his typical colorful fashion. Don't worry, Mchana. Just push. Don't worry, Mchana. And could tell after and you see, you'll get a hammering for obvious reasons. I mean, these are the highest decision-making body of the governing party.
Yeah.
Concerned about the state of the national grid and the fact that this is wiping out the South African economy. And we have appointed a minister and it doesn't appear to be any changes. Of course, we get to share, but a great deal of impatience. And I understood where that impatience came from. But I thought that...
So even from within, there was a lot
yes,
of...
genuine concern. Hey, Morena, what are you doing? Solve this thing. Stop telling us stories. The lights must be on. Of course, it takes time for this to happen. Of course, I try to explain. But the biggest comfort in government, the president gave me time. Every Monday, I will go and brief him, or a Sunday. This is where it says, no.
I see.
So what kind of assistant do you want? Are you fine? No, I'm fine, President. We've got this covered.
What was he like in those briefings?
Oh, very calm. I must say that in his own way, I mean, he's got this presence, calming demeanor, very measured, calculated. As long as you are clear about the messaging, and that's what I like, and very pedantic, focuses on the detail. He reads everything. I repeat, he reads everything. Reassuring. No, it's fine. I believe you'll get it right. What's the assistant want to do? Okay, it's fine. That for me was reassuring. And then on the party side, the fact I'll go to the SG's house, SG, this is where we are, and he'll give me time. So first is the fact that they give me time. So, and they are listening. And secondly, they say, okay, we'll help you in this way. Thirdly, how else can we help you? I'm fine. It's just a matter of time. And of course, I mean, the kind of conversations I was having with the SG to say, this is the direction we are taking. It's going to take time. These are the kind of resources that are required. The president made that possible. The SG in the party made it possible for me to find a landing that really suggests that the party should have some degree of patience and allow me an opportunity to execute. And I was given that opportunity, extremely grateful about the opportunity given by the president and the party. In the party, like I said, the SG, very instrumental. The two major protagonists in government, the president in the party, of course, the SG gave me the support, and that's all I needed. And of course, comrades from a genuine place, I would say the same. And I was telling some of them, I mean, I would be very impatient. We can see that this core economy has got huge potential. The jobs numbers are reaching record level, unemployment numbers record levels, and we know is electricity in the main and the logistics. Here we have appointed someone to resolve this problem. So the impatience was that you should have resolved it yesterday. It doesn't matter that you are appointed 2-3 months ago, but resolve this problem. And I'm happy that we're in this space. We can have these conversations, learn and unlearn from those mistakes. We have a template, what I call the Eskom template. That template can be taken to Transnet. That template can be taken to PRASA. Of course, with the nuances of those SOEs. But we know it can be done. I think that's the point I'm making.
Absolutely. And it's quite amazing how things have stabilized up to this point. I appreciate that there's still some uncertainty. But, we often criticize public officials for getting things wrong. But when things go right, we then forget and we don't. So I must just pay tribute to the work you've done, to help get the lights back is a major achievement, and long may it continue.
And I think the men and women at Eskom, I say the following season. I mean, if you were to ask me, of course, I've got, you can imagine, every intention of penning my experience at Eskom. I think there are things, lessons that can be learned. So starting from policy missteps, there are issues of leadership deficiencies there. But I'm just saying that how the Eskom story gets to be told, the recovery. I think one of the number one things to mention is leadership, exceptionally important across all levels. So I'm talking of the board, I'm talking of also of management and the alignment of that leadership to the resolution of the problem. So first is that they would have agreed on the problem statement and what needs to be resolved, and ensure that there's alignment in terms of skills, how you deploy people, which areas. And for me, that's something that has got a disproportionate positive impact on the Eskom story. We also know the opposite is true, failure of leadership, and we had seen it there. And I really don't want to use platforms to go after people. That's history. Posterity will learn about this. But I'm just saying where Eskom pivoted in the right direction is when we got the right people in the right position. And then the issues of resources, the issues of technical interventions, coordination of public-private sector intervention comes later. But what was first and foremost for me is leadership in all its manifestations. Of course, I'm what they call in research, a participant observer. So I've been there in the thick of things, in the mix, and I'll count in that general reference of leadership. So I'm able to illustrate how all of these things have contributed to the situation where we find ourselves in. And I must add that I'm confident that and bullish about the prospects of resolving this problem in the near future. But it all started with leadership. So I think we mustn't understate the importance of leadership. And in fact, it can be overemphasized. That's my point. It's a critical requirement. Once you don't get it right, it's fatal. So it just collapses whatever intervention you want to put in place. I mean, you can read even how countries were able to rise. I mean, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, for an example. I mean, they come from an era of strong men. So it's just leadership. Just that they were going in the right direction. In some instances, they characterize it as a benevolent dictatorship. But essentially taking, leading by example. Of course, the opposite is true. You can have examples of dictatorships that they have failed. And I'm not suggesting that you should go that route. Of course, the political system is important, but what is even more important is just the people who are in leadership. Collective and singularly, their contribution is immense. And that's the Eskom template I'm talking about. There are 3-4 other areas that I think must go with that leadership. And then you can export that to other areas of SOEs. You will see that this is important. I mean, Chalmers Johnson, maybe as an anecdote, when an American philosopher, political economist, trying to understand what we refer to as the Asian tigers, the rise of South Korea, Japan, and Singapore. He identifies what he calls if you like, transversal features, things that were present across all of them. One of them, without necessarily listing all of them, is just leadership. So he makes that point about leadership is important. And of course, in a war situation, you can mention that all types of situations, leadership is foremost. The Eskom example, I think for me is particularly significant in elevating the role of leadership in resolving what hitherto appeared to be an intractable problem.
Absolutely.
Yes, Caesar.
The Andre de Ruyter era at Eskom, I mean, it seems strange just from the perspective of a citizen that, we come from a moment where there was this crisis and then suddenly there was new leadership and then everything was fine. I mean, do you think, or were you able to observe, I know you don't want to talk about specific individuals, but at the same time for the country to try and understand what went wrong and what went right, do you think there were mistakes made in that era? Or what do you think went wrong that plunged us into that crisis?
I like your choice of word, in that era. So first is this leadership I'm referring to has a strong belief in its own people. So first you affirm your own, and you do everything possible to ensure that your own are able to thrive and prosper in that environment. Immediately you distrust your own. You don't place confidence in your own. You suggest that they don't have the capability to resolve the problem. They also withdraw from solution seeking. So they leave you to your devices. You know better than resolve this problem. So one of the first things that I've noticed with this era of leadership is just affirmation of the people internally. I went to a power station as part of my own way of galvanizing, if you like, the troops, for lack of better word. I make the following point. Says, I'm a civil engineer. I have no clue about how these machines work. You are technicians, you are chemical engineers, you are mechanical engineers, you are electrical engineers. You have been here for 20, 30 years. You are the ones who are going to resolve this problem. So I was not suggesting that I don't have the technical know-how. I have a comprehension of what's happening there. But just an appreciation for the rank and file.
Sure.
To know that the resolution of this problem does not sit with the minister. The resolution of this problem sits with us, so that's fine. So they carry an obligation to find ways of resolving this problem. The minister is secondary to the resolution of this problem. So it's about mobilizing the base in the right direction and saying to the base that, in fact, I'm handing over the resolution of this problem to you, but I'll be the public face of both the failures and the successes of this problem. So it's important that you affirm a base. You find people in a space, they've been there for many years. I mean, let's go back 2001, November, December. Eskom gets to be voted as the best electricity utility in the whole world by the Financial Times. And Eskom maintains that kind of performance over a period of time. And there is a great number of those engineers who carried Eskom at the time, they are still there. Why do we think that these people suddenly are incapable of resolving this problem? There is no institution on the continent, the entire continent, that has got the highest concentration of electrical and chemical engineers as you find in Eskom. Doesn't exist. There is no institution on the continent. Of course, Egypt is going that route. That has got the most number of nuclear scientists, as you find them in Eskom and in particular in Quebec. PBMR, Popular Modular Reactor, developed by South African scientists. So we're sitting with those capabilities. So why do we think that the answers will come from somewhere? So it's just an affirmation of the membership. I'm just saying the base. And then secondly, just give them the tools of trade. Create an environment that rewards good performance. And Mr. Nomaan brought it, of course, with the support of the board, to say, no, we're not going to reward you as a whole, the entire fleet. It's station by station. And then you agree through a democratic process. I say democratic because you socialize it with labor, socialize it with the general workers. These are the parameters. So we're agreeing on the parameters of what constitutes success. And once you achieve the following, this is the reward that you're going, and you stick to that reward. What are we seeing now? We're seeing intra-competition between the station. But if you are familiar with how the stations are, at each and every station, there will be anything between 5 to 10 units. So there's unit number X, unit number 1, is CISO who's responsible for that together with his team. So internally in that power station, they know if this unit is off, CISO is eating from our incentives. So they push you. Your own peers are pushing you. So you don't need some minister. You don't need a group CEO to come there. So it's what this team has done. So what we've seen in the era preceding that, first is that everyone is corrupt. Everyone is incompetent. Everyone has got an intention of collapsing this organization. I mean, really. I mean, it's like working against their own interest. I am not about to suggest to you that there were no bad elements. Of course, we're dealing with those. But the critical mass, the great majority of the men and women at Eskom, competent, skilled, committed, and patriotic. All they needed to do is someone to support them and provide an incentive dispensation that allows them to go that route. I mean, just recently, the team concluded a multi-year wage agreement. They say it record time because everyone is part of this conversation. So when you start that negotiation, it's not a new, fresh start. It's building up on existing incentives. And labor is the first one. No, we're fine, we're signing. Absolutely. Let's go and focus on getting the lights on. Now everyone has got the pride in wearing the Eskom badge. So, I mean, it's important that we don't accuse people of being corrupt when, in fact, we don't have the evidence. And I'm not suggesting that those who are found to be corrupt should not be taken to book, but it can't be everyone. And that's why the current era, for me, the critical success is as a result of this affirmation and the leadership that they've been able to provide.
Can we turn to some national questions just as we conclude, Minister? This government of national unity, as it's been called, or coalition government, is something that we're all trying to wrap our heads around. There've been some from within the liberation movement who have come out and said, you know, this is a historic reversal. Others have said this is the best thing that the ANC could do. From someone who's working within this government at the moment, do you have any views on, you know, the wisdom of going down this government of national unity route?
Well, of course, the ANC has articulated an official position. So we characterize this as a moment of fundamental consequence. So these are not conditions of our own choosing. If we had our way, we would have been the only ones to run the government, have a simple majority. The question must be asked, how did we end up here? So it's a combination of factors. So in my own calculation, and this is not a formal party position, is that a year before the elections, we give our people the highest intensity of load shedding, the most number of load shedding days. We see the deterioration of municipal water infrastructure. You see the rise in crime. You see record levels of unemployment. You see the failures at Transnet, the ones I've mentioned earlier on. You drive on roads that are just pothole riddled. Because some places try open the tap, the quality of water is suspect. Notwithstanding the major progress that we have made. So what I'm saying must not subtract from the aggregate picture, which is essentially major progress that we have made. But I'm just saying all of those people encounter them on the eve of an election. And in fact, it has been an accumulation over time. And then you have some of us in positions of leadership being accused of corruption, some getting convicted, And in fact, in some quarters, the ANC being synonymous to acts of corruption, although it's a very few. But of course, it's a public narrative. We can show you a huge number of individuals, very clean, morally upright, people like Comrade Tito, you can mention. I'm mentioning him because we just buried him now. So there are those examples. But it is those exceptions that are undermining and soiling, if you like, what we stand for. And by our own admission, we say that we need to ensure that we were able to drive this renewal program. Our own admission that something fundamentally wrong is happening in relation to the quality of the membership that you are attracting in the organization. It goes far back when 2012, when we talk about the decade of a cadre, and then we continue to refine that and modify that conceptualization, but essentially to say that we need to attract people of the right quality in the organization, committed, selfless, competent, and patriotic, and people who are not going to misdirect public resources, at least those that are deployed. So we make those admissions. And then we go into an election, highly contested, and then there are other subjective factors. So we say that an increasing role of capital to say that this organization must be displaced for one reason or the other. Significant funding to forces that are meant to undermine, if you like, the leadership of the ANC. And of course, then you have this momentum growing, an anti-ANC narrative. But the point I'm making is that fundamentally, some of these things are of our own doing, our inability to deliver as per expectation. And then you go to an election. Our base chooses to say that our allegiance is still with this movement, and we're confident that it's going to self-correct. But I'm not ready to go to the polls. I still believe in this organization. Yes, there are other people who are making noises, but this is an organization of my choosing. And that's why you see turnout being at the levels that were registered. And as a result of all of the above factors, then we register 40% of the electoral vote. And then we asked ourselves as the NEC, how best do you protect the democratic project? What we characterize as the National Democratic Revolution, the end state, united, non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous, democratic society. Those features should exist. How best do we protect it? Now, the NDR presupposes an ANC in government, because a lot of the things that we said we will do relies on an ANC in government. Our ability to exploit the levers of the state and monopoly over policy in favor of the realization of the objectives of the NDR. So then we decide that no, first we can't relinquish leadership of this of the state, because it's central to the delivery of the objectives of the NDR. We identify in the ANC nomenclature the pillars of the struggle. What are these anchors that must drive this? Is the state, the economy, and all of that. We mentioned them. So we're not about to relinquish that. We still want to be in the driving seat, albeit under conditions not of our own making. So we arrive at a calculation that let's bring everyone on board and let's agree on a minimum program. A statement of intent, and then in government it gets to be codified in the priorities. What are those priorities? An inclusive growth and job creation. The second priority, we say, fight the cost of poverty and address the cost of living. The third one, we say, to build an ethical, capable, and developmental state. Go and read our manifesto. All of these three priorities are articulated in those 6 priorities of the ANC government. It can't be a sellout position to say I want to have inclusive growth, create jobs. And of course, we articulate how that can be achieved. Can't be sellout to say that I'm still predisposed in my policy orientation to look after the poor and ensure of their economic and social progression. And that's why we're talking in the immediate fight poverty, zero hunger, and then get to a stage where reduce the cost of living. the social protection measures. I mean, if you look at the social wage, a combination of cash transfers and non-cash transfers, one of the most generous of any country in the world, by the way, and then a capable, ethical, capable developmental state at the center of this ability to resolve the social challenges, the South African conflict is the state. Is going to help us to resolve that. So the ethical talks about the manner in which it must carry it. Capable, its ability to meet its own objective, developmental, an assumption that those objectives are progressive and they are in favor of the resolution of the South African question. And then parties agree that no, it's fine, we agree to this. And then, I mean, that can be a sellout position. That's the best you could get under a constrained environment, a politically constrained environment. And in fact, I want to suggest that is a masterstroke, as Comrade Zamani makes the point in his very colorful way. He says, President Ramaphosa went out to hunting for a rabbit, he came back with a buffalo. Now, I'm not suggesting that these are ideal conditions. Of course, internally there's going to be friction. It's in the nature of the space. First, it has not matured. Second is the first time we get into ourselves in this space. It's naturally going to be that conflict, and we can see that characterized by the various parties' attitude towards Bela, towards the NHI. But we are agreed that we must fight crime. We are agreed that the economy must grow, it must be inclusive. We are agreed that we need to get people into jobs, and we ensure that these are high quality jobs, and we must improve the skills of the South Africans. We must agree that we need to ensure that the development is equitably distributed, is not concentrated in our major economic centers of Gauteng, part of KwaZulu-Natal, in particular eThekwini, Cape Town, and leave everyone out. We are agreed that women and young people have a place in this country, and we need to advance the interest of women. So I'm just saying there are huge areas of agreement, and then people choose to profile those areas of disagreement. They are invariably, it's an inherent contradiction. And in fact, I'm of the view that contradictions build momentum. So what we will find confidence building measures, but there's a minimum program on which we agree. Execute that. I mean, we are agreed that the lights must be on, so there's no confusion there. That if you have these record levels of unemployment, it's just going to sue conditions of discontent. So there's going to be a groundswell of grievance that can undermine the security of this country. So it's an emergency. We are all agreed on that. So I'm not about to suggest that everything is perfect. It will be a height of folly, but there's progress that we are making. That's the point I'm making.
And how's the cabinet, to the extent that you can divulge, functioning? Do you think that your colleagues across different parties are committed to a program and things are functioning as well as they could be? Oh, yes. I mean, you look at the cabinet statement, state visits, what various members of cabinet who comes from other parties other than the ANC, because cabinet is one, so it doesn't have the identity of a party. It's a cabinet led by President Ramaphosa. No, we are pulling together, and I'm not about to suggest to you that there are no areas of disagreement. So there's a mechanism that the president has introduced, the cabinet has agreed to, of what they call a clearinghouse. Yes. So just an admission that let those things that the majority of things that work, let them work, and then we accept that the areas that requires greater investment in their resolution, and let's not allow these areas to undermine the progress that we can be making in other areas of our life. It doesn't replace cabinet. So it's not an introduction of a mechanism outside the constitutional construct of this country. But if you like, it's a tactical initiative to ensure that cabinet continues to work and does the work that is expected of it. And then that those issues that can undermine the progress and be toxic to this relationship, let's find a way of dealing with them whilst we allow the others to work. And I'm confident that we'll get it right. I mean, to suggest that things are 100% perfect will be to mislead the public. But also to suggest that things are collapsing is just completely not true. There's progress we are seeing, and I'm confident we'll get it right. Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. Just finally, I made a video on the future of the ANC, and I painted some scenarios because, of course, President Ramaphosa's term as president comes to an end after this term. And we've never seen a third term in democratic South Africa, so he's probably going to stop his leadership of the ANC. Now, in the comments of that video, a lot of people said, you could be a potential ANC leader. Is that something that would be something that you're thinking about? And what are your thoughts on the future of the party as it enters quite a transitional moment over the next 3 years or so?
Well, first is humbling that there are certain quarters of the country that think that someone like me could be a president. Of course, I'm sure you are expecting this answer from me to say that we'll allow the process to unfold. But I want to be part of a leadership that is at the forefront of the resolution of the South African challenges, and that leadership being in the ANC. I'm convinced that we're going through a phase, we're going through a period. I think we have hit the bottom. From here, we can simply go up. We have made an admission that renewal is indispensable to, if you like, the recovery of the ANC. It's an existential issue that is confronting us. So I'm more than confident that this generation of leaders is going to, does have the capacity, the willingness and the know-how of resolving these challenges. But speed is important, that we were able to resolve these challenges quicker. It's largely an internal issue that requires a confrontation, and we must be candid about the existence of those challenges. And if you look at the diagnostic report that Comrade Mantashe presented in his previous capacity as a secretary, it does highlight, if you like, some of these challenges and the pathologies that are confronting the organization that requires attention. We have taken time to resolve those. If anything, some of them have become even more acute. They have escalated to a point where they've undermined our democratic majority. So I think we know what could happen. So we started the signals with Tshwane, Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, where we lost our majority. So this thing is, you don't win by decree. So we're not anointed to lead this country. So the ANC can't suggest that there is a leader of society, and in fact that position is unassailable. No, you are not entitled. So you must continue to refresh yourself to lay claim to that aim. So where we at, we know that they were not fulfilling what our potential is. We need to do a whole lot more to get this going. I think that, and I'm convinced that the ANC remains part of the solution of the country's problems. I'm confident in that the ANC will author, if you like, the resolutions of this problem. And I accept that the ANC has been complicit to getting us to where we're at. And I'm more than confident that the ANC will be the first one to accept those limitations and welcome the responsibility for us to resolve this challenge. And yes, I want to be part of that generation that helps to resolve that challenge in whatever capacity. More than ready, highly competent individuals in the ANC, a myriad of them in the ANC, and they're committed to the resolution of this. As to in what capacity, what position, like I said, branches will make that determination, and at the right time when the party says yes, now the race has started, then we will calculate where we're at. But I really want to be part of the resolution of this problem.
Well, Minister Kgosientso Ramokgopa, thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
No, thank you very much, Caesar. Thank you for the invite.
It was a great honor. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get to our next milestone of 200,000 subscribers and leave a comment down below. Thanks for joining us again. Aye.